What if I told you that your obsession with becoming a better version of yourself might be exactly what's destroying you? That maybe you're not truly living a journey of growth, but instead feeding a new kind of mental prison? Because, deep down, what society calls self-improvement has, for many, become a sophisticated form of self-punishment. Look around you. Social media is full of mantras like, never stop improving, get 1% better every day, wake up at 5 a.m. and conquer the world. And, of course, there's nothing wrong with wanting to grow. But the line between inspiration and pressure is much thinner than it seems. And the truth is, for a frightening number of people, this pursuit has stopped being healthy. It's turned into a race with no finish line, a constant effort to reach an ideal version of yourself that never arrives. Have you ever felt that? That sense that no matter how much you do, study, or discipline yourself, it's never enough. So you buy another course, read another book, add another goal to the list. At first, it feels motivating, but over time, it starts to suffocate you, because the focus is no longer on what you've built, but on what you still haven't achieved. It's like trying to fill a bucket with holes. You pour in effort, energy, and time, and it all leaks out. And worse, every new hole you find doesn't make you stop to fix it. It makes you run faster, work harder, try to pour in even more, until you realize you're no longer living to enjoy what you've achieved. You're living to avoid the discomfort of feeling like you're still not enough. Here's the point almost no one admits. Modern self-improvement sells you the idea that if you're not in constant progress, you're failing. But that constant pressure erodes your peace, your focus, and, ironically, your actual ability to grow. Because living in a 24/7 state of self-criticism is not evolution. It's exhaustion. I know you might feel resistance hearing this. Part of you might say, but if I stop striving to improve, I'll stagnate. Yet there's a massive difference between growing consciously and forcing yourself into an endless journey that, deep down, only reinforces the belief that you're never good enough. And make no mistake, this isn't just about professional goals, productivity, or discipline. It reaches into the way you see yourself. When growth becomes compulsion, every failure becomes proof that you're inadequate. Every pause becomes a sign of weakness. Every achievement is erased by the next goal. Here's what no one tells you. This mentality doesn't lead you to become a better version of yourself. It leads you to live in a chronic state of anxiety disguised as motivation. You call it focus, but it's fear. You call it high performance, but it's escape. An escape from stopping, looking inward, and accepting that yes, you are already enough right now. And that growth doesn't have to be an act of desperation. But if this is true, why are so many people stuck in this cycle? Because it's addictive. Because there's a hit of dopamine in feeling like you're doing something for your life every single day. And because the culture we live in reinforces it constantly. If you're not climbing, you're falling. And that is one of the biggest lies we've ever been sold. Today, I want to show you a way out. I want you to see that it's possible to evolve without destroying yourself. That you can have ambition without living in exhaustion. And that there's a path to grow without turning self-improvement into the new form of depression. And that's exactly why, in the next part, we're going to dive deep into the invisible trap that keeps you stuck, even when you think you're free. Because until you can see that trap clearly, you'll keep running and never arrive. If you want to understand why your self-improvement journey feels heavier than liberating, you have to see the trap you've been walking into over and over again, without even noticing it. It's not the books, the courses, or the challenges that are the problem. It's the belief that you'll finally feel complete once you've fixed enough things about yourself. Here's the truth most people won't admit. The self-improvement industry thrives on convincing you that you're always one step away from being ready. One more skill, one more morning routine tweak, one more productivity hack. But ready never comes, does it? Because the moment you hit one milestone, there's another waiting. And when you reach that one, there's another, and another. The finish line keeps moving, not because you're growing, but because the game is designed that way. Think about it. If you ever truly felt enough, if you genuinely believed you had what you needed to live a fulfilled life right now, how many of these endless programs would you still buy? How many hours would you still spend scrolling through motivational content, searching for that next piece of advice to finally unlock your life? That's the invisible trap, the idea that you're broken and need constant fixing. It's subtle because it wears the mask of ambition. It sounds noble. It feels productive. But underneath, It's just another form of self-doubt dressed in nicer clothes. And here's the cruel twist. The more you engage with it, the more you reinforce it. You start associating worth with progress, but not actual progress, measurable and real. Instead, it's the appearance of progress. You get that little rush of satisfaction from working on yourself, even if nothing truly changes. And that rush is addictive. That's why you can finish a 300-page book, underline every other sentence, and still wake up the next day feeling exactly the same. Because you weren't reading to apply. You were reading to temporarily silence the discomfort of not feeling good enough. And the industry knows this. That's why most of what's marketed as life-changing advice is just a recycled version of what you've already heard, wrapped in a shinier package. They're not selling transformation. They're selling hope in small doses. Just enough to keep you coming back, but never enough to set you free. Now, I'm not saying the tools themselves are bad. Books, seminars, coaching, all of that can be powerful if approached with the right mindset. The problem is when you approach them from a place of lack. Because if you start with the belief that you're broken, every step you take will be about fixing, and fixing never ends. Here's how you can tell you're caught in this trap. You feel guilty taking a break because it feels like wasting time. You can't enjoy what you've achieved because you're already thinking about the next goal. You measure your worth by how productive or on track you feel each day. You feel a constant, low-level anxiety that you're behind, even when you're ahead. If any of this sounds familiar, it's because the trap is working exactly as intended. It's keeping you in a loop where growth isn't about becoming more. It's about constantly proving you're not less. The truth is, real self-improvement should set you free, not tie you to an endless treadmill. It should make you feel more present, not more pressured. It should build your self-respect, not erode it with a constant reminder that you're not there yet. But here's the thing. Escaping this trap doesn't start with throwing away your goals or refusing to learn new things. It starts with changing the reason behind why you do them. Because when the goal shifts from fix myself to express the best of myself, the entire game changes. You stop chasing some distant, perfect future and start living in a way that already reflects who you want to be. We're going to talk about the single most destructive mistake people make in this cycle, and how it quietly turns your self-improvement into self-sabotage. Because until you see that mistake clearly, you'll keep trying harder and wondering why nothing feels different. There's a reason you can spend months, even years, on a self-improvement journey and still feel like you're running in circles. It's not a lack of discipline. It's not because you haven't found the perfect morning routine or the one magic book that will unlock your potential. The real reason is far more subtle and far more damaging. It's because you've been trying to build a new life on top of a belief that poisons every step you take. The belief that you are not enough until you become someone else. This is the most destructive mistake people make when they dive into personal growth. They turn it into an identity war. Instead of using self-improvement as a way to refine the person they already are, they treat it as a mission to replace themselves entirely. And here's the truth. That is a battle you cannot win. When you chase an image of a better you that exists only in your imagination, every moment you spend striving toward it sends the same message to yourself. Who I am right now isn't worthy. And when that message becomes the soundtrack of your life, no amount of progress will feel like progress. Think back to a goal you once set that felt monumental at the time. Maybe it was losing a certain amount of weight, hitting a certain income, moving to a certain city, or earning a degree you dreamed about. You imagined that once you reached it, something inside you would click into place and stay there. But what happened? If you're like most people, you enjoyed a brief wave of satisfaction, followed quickly by a new sense of restlessness. The high faded, the finish line moved, and you were back on the treadmill. That's because the problem was never the goal itself. The problem was the condition you attached to your self-worth. You told yourself, I'll feel enough when. And when arrived, it wasn't enough. Because the rule you've been living by says it can't be enough. Conditional self-worth is like a contract you sign with yourself that can never be fulfilled. Even your wins are temporary. Even your proudest moments are undermined by a voice that says, good, but not quite there yet. This is why so many people can reach extraordinary levels of external success and still feel empty inside. They've been living in a state of self-rejection disguised as ambition. The world applauds them for their drive, but they carry the quiet burden of never being able to stop and simply feel at peace. And here's the cruel irony. The more you buy into this belief, the more it seems to work against you. The more you achieve, the more you move the bar higher, which means the more you confirm your own inadequacy. It becomes a cycle where achievement feeds the very insecurity you're trying to escape. Real self-improvement doesn't start from a place of, I'm broken and need to be fixed. It starts from, I am enough and I want to grow from here. That shift sounds small, but it changes everything. When you begin from self-respect instead of self-rejection, the work you do to grow is lighter, more intentional, and far more sustainable. Think of it like building a house. If the foundation is solid, every new addition makes the structure stronger. If the foundation is cracked, every new layer adds more weight to a system that's already unstable. Eventually, it collapses, and you're left wondering why you can never seem to hold on to progress. Most people never even question the foundation. They just keep stacking more goals, more habits, more hacks on top of it. And when the structure inevitably wobbles, they assume they need to work harder, add more, push further. They don't realize the problem isn't the size of their ambition, it's the place it's coming from. When your worth is a moving target, you'll never feel the freedom to slow down, to appreciate what you've built, or to live without that constant low-level anxiety buzzing in the background. But when your worth is a given, when you know you are enough right now, the entire meaning of progress shifts. It stops being about proving something and starts being about expressing something. You're not climbing to escape who you are. You're climbing to explore how far you can go. This isn't about lowering your standards or losing your edge. It's about refusing to weaponize your ambition against yourself. It's about deciding that you will no longer postpone your right to feel worthy until you hit the next target. Once you make that decision, the urgency changes. You're no longer chasing every goal like it's a lifeline. You can move with intention instead of desperation. And in that space, you not only grow faster, you enjoy the process more because it's no longer a constant reminder of what you lack. And here's the unexpected part. When you let go of the need to prove your worth, you often achieve more, not less. Because you're no longer weighed down by the fear of still not being enough. You can take risks without seeing failure as an indictment of your value. You can step back without feeling guilty. You can live without every moment needing to count towards some invisible scoreboard. That's the mistake that keeps people stuck. Not their lack of effort, but the belief fueling their effort. And until that belief changes, even your biggest victories will feel strangely hollow. When your definition of success is always somewhere ahead of you, you never actually get to live inside it. You convince yourself that you're on the way, but the truth is, you're permanently stuck in transit. And living like that comes with a cost you don't see at first, a cost that quietly eats away at your motivation, your peace, and eventually your ability to even imagine a life that feels enough. The first cost is the erosion of joy. Think about it. How can you enjoy a moment if, in your mind, it's only a stepping stone? You finish a project you worked on for months, and instead of celebrating, you're already calculating how much further you have to go. You hit a personal milestone, and the very next thought is about what's still missing. Joy becomes something you delay, something you'll allow yourself to feel when you've gone just a little further. But that further keeps moving, so joy never actually arrives. The second cost is mental exhaustion. Always chasing means never resting, not truly. Even when you take a break, your mind is rehearsing the next move, planning the next step, worried about losing momentum. You can't enjoy a quiet evening because you feel guilty for not using the time productively. You wake up thinking about what you didn't do yesterday instead of what you're excited to do today. Over time, that drains you in ways you don't immediately notice. Your mind becomes like a phone that's always on low battery, functional, but never fully charged. Then there's the cost to your relationships. When you're living in a constant state of not there yet, you often project that mindset onto others without realizing it. You expect them to move at your pace, to match your intensity, to share your urgency. And when they don't, you judge them, silently or out loud. Worse, you sometimes avoid deeper connections because you feel like you need to get your life together first. You tell yourself you'll invest in friendships, in love, in community once you've reached a certain point. But that point keeps drifting further, so those relationships never fully grow. The most dangerous cost, though, is the slow erosion of your sense of self. When you spend years defining yourself by the gap between where you are and where you want to be, you start to lose sight of who you are without that gap. Your identity becomes the person who's working on themselves. And while that sounds admirable, it can trap you. Because what happens if you ever decide to stop chasing? If your whole sense of purpose is tied to the pursuit, standing still feels like losing who you are. I've seen this play out in countless ways. A business owner sells their company for more money than they ever imagined, and within months, they're restless and unhappy. An athlete retires at the top of their game and suddenly feels aimless, even depressed. Not because they miss the work itself, but because without the chase, they no longer know where to place their value. That's the real danger of never arriving. You never learn how to live in the place you've been working so hard to reach. You're always preparing for life instead of living it. You're always rehearsing for a moment that never comes. And here's what makes it so deceptive. From the outside, you look driven, focused, disciplined. People might even admire your commitment. But inside, you're constantly running, and no one sees the toll it takes. They see the highlight reel. You feel the weight of the unending climb. The truth is, ambition without the ability to arrive isn't really ambition, it's a treadmill. You burn energy, you sweat, you push yourself, and when you stop, you're still in the exact same place. Your body might be stronger, but your sense of fulfillment hasn't moved an inch. Escaping that cycle doesn't mean giving up on goals or letting yourself drift. It means learning to let arrival be a part of the process, not just the end of it. It means allowing yourself to recognize the moments you once wished for and actually live in them before racing to the next one. It's about shifting the way you measure progress, not just by how far you've climbed, but by how fully you're living at each stage of the climb. Because what's the point of reaching the peak if you never look up from the trail? And here's the quiet truth. When you learn how to arrive along the way, you stop burning out. You move with more energy, not less, because you're no longer running from a place of lack. You can pause without panic. You can enjoy without guilt. And when you do push forward, it's because you're pulled by inspiration, not chased by inadequacy. It's a different way of living, one where progress still matters, but presence matters just as much. One where success is not just a distant horizon, but a series of places you actually get to stand, breathe, and appreciate before taking the next step. At some point, you have to stop asking, "How do I fix myself?" and start asking, "How do I live well right now?" Because the truth is, the endless chase for a better version of yourself often blinds you to the fact that the life you want is built from the life you already have. The shift begins with understanding this. Self-improvement is not about replacing the person you are. It's about expanding what's already working, refining what matters, and letting go of the weight you don't need to carry anymore. It's not a war against yourself, it's a partnership. And the moment you start seeing it that way, the pressure changes. Growth stops feeling like a punishment for not being enough and starts feeling like an investment in a life that already has value. The first step in this perspective shift is to anchor your self-worth in something unshakable. Not in your income, your appearance, your productivity, or even your habits, but in the simple, unchangeable fact that you are already worthy of living fully, right now, without adding or subtracting anything. When you make that your starting point, self-improvement becomes a way of expressing that worth instead of trying to earn it. The second step is redefining what progress means. If your only measure of success is the gap between where you are and some distant finish line, you'll always feel behind. But if you measure progress by the quality of your days, the consistency of your actions, and the depth of your presence, you start to see wins everywhere. Suddenly, reading one chapter of a book counts. Taking time to cook a meal you enjoy counts. Pausing to have an honest conversation counts. You stop discounting the small things, because you understand they're the building blocks of the big things. The third step is releasing the myth of constant acceleration. Growth is not linear, and it's not meant to be a straight climb. Seasons of rest are not signs of weakness. They're part of the rhythm that makes sustainable growth possible. Just like a muscle needs recovery to grow stronger, your mind and your life need moments of stillness to integrate what you've learned. Without that integration, you're just collecting ideas and habits without ever letting them take root. Another part of this shift is moving from comparison to calibration. When you compare yourself to others, you either inflate your ego or crush your confidence. Neither creates real growth. Calibration, on the other hand, means using what you see in others as data, not judgment. You ask, does this align with who I want to become? Does it fit my values? Does it energize me or drain me? You stop trying to keep up and start choosing your own pace, your own metrics, your own definition of enough. And perhaps most importantly, you learn to celebrate arrival, not just once at the end of some huge journey, but over and over again, in the small milestones that prove you're living differently. You start to see that every day you live aligned with your values is a day you've arrived. You stop postponing contentment. You stop treating life like a waiting room. This doesn't mean abandoning ambition. It means rooting ambition in gratitude instead of scarcity. When you operate from that place, you can want more without feeling like you're failing until you get it. You can aim high without the constant undertone of fear that you'll never reach it. And ironically, this is the mindset that makes it easier to achieve, because you're no longer exhausting yourself trying to outrun the feeling of inadequacy. This shift isn't just mental, it's practical. It changes how you set goals, how you structure your time, how you make decisions. When you're no longer chasing approval or validation, you can be more strategic, more selective, and more patient. You stop scattering your energy across dozens of shoulds and start focusing it on the few things that truly matter. And that focus compounds. Small, intentional actions taken from a place of self-respect build momentum in a way frantic effort never can. You don't burn out because you're not sprinting. You're moving at a pace you can sustain, one that leaves room for joy, for connection, for living. Once you experience that shift, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how many people around you are trapped in the old way of thinking, running hard, achieving much, but never letting themselves feel at peace. You see the signs in their eyes, in their words, in the way they dismiss their own progress. And you realize that the real win isn't just reaching the next level. It's being able to live fully at every level you reach. This is the kind of growth that doesn't just make you more accomplished, it makes you more alive. And when you feel more alive, you bring that energy into everything you do. Your work becomes sharper, your relationships deeper, your presence stronger. You become the kind of person who doesn't just chase a life worth living. You actually lives it. Once you understand that real self-improvement begins from self-respect rather than self-rejection, the question becomes, how do you actually live this out every day? Because without a clear framework, even the most powerful mindset shift can get lost in the noise of old habits and external pressure. Redefining growth starts with setting limits. Not because you're afraid of doing too much, but because you want to make sure the more you're chasing is the right kind of more. This means being selective about the goals you set and the advice you follow. You don't need to take every challenge, read every trending book, or jump on every productivity trend. In fact, the more noise you cut out, the more room you create for depth instead of constant distraction. Another crucial part is building intentional pauses into your life. Most people only stop when they're forced to, when burnout catches up or a crisis demands it. But the healthiest growth happens when you step back before you reach that breaking point. This could be as small as setting a rule to unplug for 1 hour each night, or as significant as taking a week off to reassess your direction. The point isn't the length of the pause, it's the intention behind it. You're teaching yourself that rest is not the opposite of growth, it's part of it. Equally important is disconnecting from the constant comparison machine. Social media can be a powerful tool for inspiration, but it can just as easily turn into a measuring stick you use to shrink yourself. One practical habit that can change everything is creating comparison-free zones. Maybe you decide your mornings are for your thoughts only. No scrolling, no checking what everyone else is doing. Or you set aside 1 day a week where you interact with the real world only, using your energy to invest in your own projects without any outside noise. And while we're talking about practical changes, you have to learn how to celebrate progress without the pressure to immediately level up. This means creating moments of acknowledgement, no matter how small the step. If you finish a difficult workout, pause to feel that accomplishment instead of jumping straight to what's next. If you complete a big project, take a day to enjoy the freedom before filling the space with the next deadline. You have to train yourself to arrive over and over again. Redefining growth also means being deeply aware of your energy, not just your time. Time management is meaningless if you're constantly exhausted. Ask yourself, which activities leave me feeling more alive? Which ones drain me, no matter how productive they look on paper? Then make the hard call to cut or reduce the draining ones, even if they're impressive to others. Because growth is not about impressing others. It's about building a life that's sustainable for you. One of the most underrated shifts you can make is focusing on consistency over intensity. A lot of people burn out because they treat personal growth like a sprint. They overhaul their entire life in one go, only to collapse under the weight of all the changes. The truth is, small actions done daily are far more powerful than massive overhauls done once in a while. 10 minutes of focused practice beats an hour of distracted effort. A steady rhythm beats an erratic burst every time. It's also worth rethinking your relationship with failure. When you're trapped in the old mindset, failure feels like proof that you're not enough. But in this new definition of growth, failure is feedback, nothing more, nothing less. It's not the end of the journey. It's a signpost telling you what to adjust. When you take away the personal attack from failure, you can respond with clarity instead of shame, and that accelerates your progress in ways perfectionism never will. And then there's the matter of identity. Your habits are not just actions, they're votes for the kind of person you believe you are. So instead of chasing results as a way to become someone else, start acting like the person you want to be today. If you want to be healthy, move like a healthy person moves. If you want to be confident, speak and carry yourself like someone who believes in their own voice. Identity-driven growth feels different because it's rooted in the present, not delayed into some imaginary future. You'll notice that as you redefine growth this way, your ambition doesn't go away, it just changes shape. It becomes calmer, more focused, and oddly, more powerful. You stop scattering your effort across endless shoulds and pour it into a few essential musts. You stop overloading yourself with metrics that don't matter and start tracking the things that actually improve your quality of life. The biggest surprise? When you live like this, you often achieve more than you did when you were pushing yourself relentlessly. Not because you're working harder, but because you're working better. Your energy is cleaner, your focus is sharper, and the sense of meaning you get from your actions fuels you instead of draining you. This is the version of growth that lasts. The version that doesn't leave you burned out, bitter, or perpetually unsatisfied. It's not about slowing down for the sake of slowing down. It's about building a life where every step forward is both sustainable and satisfying. And once you experience that, you can't imagine going back to the old way. The whole point of growth is to become more of who you truly are, not less. And yet, in the endless chase for improvement, too many people end up abandoning the very things that make them unique. They trade their authenticity for efficiency, their curiosity for routine, their joy for a checklist of successful habits. They hit their goals, but feel strangely disconnected from the person living inside those achievements. This is the quiet tragedy of self-improvement done wrong. It promises to help you find yourself, but if you're not careful, it can strip away your identity one small compromise at a time. And by the time you notice, the version of you in the mirror feels polished, but hollow. Growing without losing yourself starts with this simple commitment. You will not sacrifice your values, your relationships, or your peace just to hit a metric. That means you decide, right now, what lines you will not cross, no matter how tempting the reward on the other side might be. If a goal demands that you abandon what matters most, it's not a worthy goal. It also means refusing to turn your life into a constant performance. When every action is done for the sake of optics, to be shared, praised, or validated, you lose the private space where real growth happens. Some of your best work, your deepest breakthroughs, will never be visible to anyone but you. And that's not only okay, it's necessary. One of the greatest dangers in the age of public self-improvement is that we start to measure our progress by how impressive it looks to others instead of how meaningful it feels to us. That's how you end up living a life that photographs well, but doesn't feel good to live. So make it a rule to measure by internal markers, your energy, your clarity, your sense of alignment. If those are rising, you're winning, even if no one else notices. Growing without losing yourself also means staying deeply connected to the things that make you feel alive outside of achievement. Hobbies with no productivity value, conversations that aren't about goals, moments of silliness, of stillness, of pure presence. Because if every part of your life is optimized for progress, you eventually lose the ability to enjoy anything that doesn't move the needle. The truth is, balance isn't something you find, it's something you actively create. And you create it by choosing, over and over, to protect the parts of your life that don't fit neatly into a self-improvement plan. If you love music, play it without turning it into a side hustle. If you love walking, do it without tracking the calories burned. If you love reading, let yourself enjoy a story without trying to extract a lesson from every page. Because here's the paradox. The more space you leave for these seemingly unproductive things, the more they actually fuel your growth. They restore your energy. They reconnect you to your humanity. And they remind you why you started this journey in the first place. Not to become a machine, but to live a richer, deeper human life. This doesn't mean growth should be easy or always comfortable. Discomfort is part of the process. It's how you stretch beyond your limits. But there's a difference between the discomfort of expansion and the pain of self-betrayal. One makes you stronger, the other quietly eats away at you. Your job is to know the difference and have the courage to step back when you cross that line. And maybe most importantly, growing without losing yourself means defining success on your own terms. Not the version handed to you by your industry, your culture, or the influencers you follow. It's easy to inherit someone else's dream without realizing it, to work tirelessly toward an image of success that doesn't actually belong to you. But if you build your life on someone else's blueprint, even your victories will feel empty. So ask yourself, what do I want my days to look like? What kind of relationships do I want to nurture? How do I want to feel when I wake up and when I go to sleep? Let those answers shape your goals, and let your goals evolve as you do. Because the truth is, you are not a project with a completion date. You are a work in progress for as long as you're alive. And that's not a flaw, it's the point. The aim isn't to reach some final, perfect version of yourself and freeze there forever. The aim is to keep growing, learning, and refining while staying deeply rooted in who you are. When you hold on to that truth, you stop fearing the pace of your progress. You stop resenting the gaps between where you are and where you want to be. And you start living in a way that honors both, the journey and the person making it. So keep moving forward, but don't lose yourself in the process. Let your growth make you more you, not less. And remember, the most successful people aren't the ones who've reached the top at any cost. They're the ones who built a life they can actually stand to live once they get there. If these words are resonating with you, hit subscribe now, not just to follow another self-improvement channel, but to join a space where growth doesn't come at the cost of who you are. Because here, we're not chasing an image of perfection. We're building the kind of life that